What is up, Black World? You're here with your boy Chris, and today we're going to discuss the top 5 things I learned in 2020. Stay tuned. As always, I'm nothing without you. Be sure to like and subscribe so we can grow together. I wanted to go on record and state that these top 5 lessons that I learned in 2020 are just that. Lessons that I learned. Your year could have been different. You could have had major ups, major downs in the year, and you might not always see things the way I see things. But I did my best to generalize and synthesize some of these lessons so the lessons can apply to people in all different types of walks of life. The first lesson that I learned in 2020 is that you cannot compartmentalize a year, which means that a lot of people like to say, 2020 was a terrible year. Look at what happened. Let's just throw the whole year away and start from 2021. We like to compartmentalize things like, oh, that was a terrible year. Let's go ahead and start again. But I don't think that that's the proper way to look at things. 2020 wasn't an all bad year for everyone. You can't wake up and say, oh, this year, every day of this year was terrible, and therefore we need to throw the whole year away. You cannot wake up and say every day of this year was great, and we can keep the whole year. 2020 was just like many other years in your life. You had ups and downs. Although we had some pretty interesting events occur on the global scale, you personally still had ups and downs that we as human beings experienced throughout all of our lifetimes. And that also leads into the reason of why I think that New Year's resolutions simply don't work. You can't wake up on December 31st and say, okay, starting tomorrow, I'm going to start this habit if you have not already been building for that habit the year prior. You cannot compartmentalize that 1 year. You have to build every day consistently. The second thing that 2020 taught me, which is kind of something that I already knew, but having an emergency fund is extremely important. I'm aware that a lot of Americans are falling on hard times because they're unable to pay their bills. I'm also aware that this happened really fast to a lot of people who didn't have the proper savings built up. Ideally, either 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up, depending on what you do. I experienced some hardships as well during the year, just like everybody else. I was laid off. Fortunately, I had enough saved in an emergency fund, so it wasn't that big of a deal, or I wasn't stressing as bad as I would have been versus if I was living paycheck to paycheck. So the second thing that's very important is having an emergency fund. I would start by saving up $1,000 first, and then paying off all your debt, and then continuing to build that emergency fund up to 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. The third thing that 2020 has taught me is to have a daily routine. And what I mean by that is a daily wake-up routine and a daily bed routine. So for an example, when the pandemic first hit, I was only affected by it a little bit, but then once they started closing a lot of the institutions that had to do with my daily routine, I noticed that certain things began to become chaotic in my life. And what I mean by that is my routine consisted of waking up, reading, stretching, going to the gym, A, B, C, and D. But once the pandemic changed a lot of what I did, I had to adjust, which means that I didn't just totally throw away my daily habits. I had to adjust them and able to continue to exercise during the pandemic. And what I also mean is that you should be going to bed at a decent time, around the same time every night, unless, work or something else jumps in the way, and you should be waking up around the same time every morning. These things will help you with depression. They'll help with a lot of mental illness. They also help you feel better throughout the day. The fourth thing that 2020 has taught me is that you only have control over your thoughts. So this is a concept that a lot of people may or may not like to be on board with, but what I mean by that is that you cannot control when your state decides to open back up, or when the government decides to open back up, or when your job decides to call you back. You cannot control any of those things. What you can control is your thought process and how you think about the situation. Did you use the incidents that happened in 2020 to spur your side hustle? Did you read more books? Did you spend more time with your family? How did you adjust and overcome the obstacles of 2020? To elaborate further, 2020 has taught me to focus on my circle of influence, basically honing in on what I can control and letting go of the things that I cannot control so much. The fifth thing that 2020 has taught me is that family and friendship is extremely important. 2020 has seen a lot of families fall on hard times, and this is the time where we need to be depending on our close friends and our family for support, emotional support, economic support, and just basically just friendships in general. Family has always been important, but when the obstacles of 2020 reared their ugly head, family can always come through in a clutch. And that also goes with reaching out to your family. If you live on your own and have elderly parents, make sure that you're reaching out and talking to your parents, calling them and letting them know that you love them. Your children, your uncles, your aunts, and even your friends. Maintaining that friendship through this pandemic is extremely important, because we human beings are social creatures. We want to be around people, even if we say we don't want to be around people. While family has always been important, 2020 has gone on to show and highlight why family is important. Because family, real family, is supposed to be there for you during times of need. So those are the top 5 things I took out of 2020. This is a bonus tip, right? Just remember that you're mortal. It kind of goes to say that you can leave life at any time, including right now. So keep that in the forefront of your mind as you make your decisions and as you come across obstacles. It might mean that arguments that seem very big are kind of minuscule. It might mean that problems that seem gargantuan are actually small in nature when you put it on the pedestal of mortality and death. And I figure that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So these have been my top 5 things I've learned in 2020. If you have anything that you want to add to this list or think that I should have mentioned in 2020, go ahead and put that down in the comments. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe, because I'm nothing without you. All right, peace.